The state of TriMet we started last month. This is a continuation of that. The more we can keep having this discussion, especially if we're not doing as many private meetings, or public meetings, sorry. And I think we, as you just indicated, we used the web as a source. It seemed like we had thousands of people that had logged on to give their comments. Is that something that's as easy to do as it was the last budget year? So you go, there's a series of questions, or or just statements so that people become educated? Okay, because I haven't done it yet myself. All right. And then the pushback I have, Neil, is I heard you say your goal, or our goal, is to increase service, but only if we can sustain minutes, and only if some of these other things happen. So if some of these things were to happen, is there a timeline that we can look to increase service? Or do we dare say?
Well,
our
current forecast would tell us that we really don't have the ability to expand service, even with the union contract, but that would allow us, again, the stability going forward. But, you know, we're always looking for ways to do more with less, and that will continue. So my hope is that, and, you know, part of it is we have to watch the payroll forecast, payroll tax forecast, to see how that is. But the assumption we have right now is that we won't be in a position to raise service for some time.
Okay, and I think that's okay to have that message as we talk about transparency, and just want to make sure that people understand that as well. It's not something that's going to happen anytime soon, given everything else we have on our plate. So.
Now, I would note that the I'm always forgetting this number, 1.6 or 1.7 that we have for actually service improvements in the next year, that's also programmed in our forecast for the future years. So that does allow us to keep up with overcrowded buses and delayed buses, scheduled changes. Maybe not as aggressively as we like, but it does allow us to address some of the real problems on service overall.
That's good. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Neil?
Well, wanted to invite Luann for a few comments, and as she's coming up, I wanted to once again thank particularly Luann, but also all 12 members of the General Manager's Budget Task Force. As you remember, last year they weighed in very heavily on the difficult decisions that we face, and this year was really no different. So I really wanted to recognize the great work of the task force. Luann, who chaired it, and he's been a great writer of the system on a regular basis, and so personal involvement with that. And that's good. So,
welcome. Appreciate having you here.
Thank you. Okay, so our report this year focused on answering 3 basic questions. The first was, are TriMet's financial assumptions and forecasts reasonable? Excuse me. And our answer is yes. The BTF noted that the state's Office of Economic Analysis forecast for growth in the payroll tax rate is encouraging, especially for the metro area. However, the BTF believes that there is still too much uncertainty to think about adding service at this time. It's not in anyone's best interest to add service, only to have to remove it later. And we believe that although the short-term outlook appears better, the underlying fiscal struggles remain, the uncertain and difficult labor negotiations, unreliable federal funding, and uncertain payroll tax revenues. And the second question was, is TriMet taking the right approach with its employees? And we said, we believe yes, they are, but we think that there's more communication that is needed to help employees better understand TriMet's financial challenges, mainly what the high cost of health care benefits for representative employees and retirees, along with outdated rules, what those are costing the region in lost service. And the third question was, are TriMet's FY14 budget recommendations helping build a foundation for a cost-effective service? And again, we said yes. We support TriMet's prudent, fix what we have, pay what we owe philosophy. The BTF believes that the agency must keep working on addressing unsustainable labor costs holding the line on administrative costs, paying down long-term obligations, and reducing operating costs. It is only then that TriMet can begin to grow services. So in our report, we had 11 recommendations, and 3 of our specific recommendations I just wanted to comment on today was the state of good repair. We support TriMet's efforts to take full advantage of the new federal MAP $21 that will be available to make capital and infrastructure improvements. We are also pleased that TriMet is purchasing new buses to bring its aging bus fleet closer to the industry standard of 8 years, which will improve the quality of service to customers. The second one was technology and partnerships. We would like to encourage TriMet to continue making smart investments in new technologies, such as the e-fare project that's going on, and to keep building partnerships and leveraging opportunities like they're doing right now with the new sector planning process in Washington County. And then the third was the strategic plan. We understand that the TriMet board wants to develop a strategic financial plan to help guide and make more transparent the budget decisions. We wholeheartedly agree with this, but we want to encourage the board to first adopt a strategic plan that helps build better public understanding of the critical roles that transit plays in the region. And then I would like to emphasize 2 areas that the BTF considered very important. The first is healthcare costs. TriMet's #1 impediment to accomplishing a sustainable financial future is its overriding and continuing struggle excuse me, to bring representative active employees and retiree healthcare costs in line with the market. Evidence is overwhelming that this benefit is not only hugely out of line with other peer and public agencies, but is already at the level the Affordable Health Care Act calls a Cadillac plan. Progress has been made with the recent arbitration decision, but more is needed. And then the second area I wanted to emphasize was the collective bargaining. We support employees returning to a collective bargaining environment where there can be meaningful negotiation, and in the end it allows representative employees the ability to vote for their contract. This means removing TriMet from the binding arbitration law. We hope that lawmakers will see this as clearly as we do. And I want to close by thanking my colleagues on the task force for all their hard work. Every member of the BTF brought a different experience, expertise, and perspective to the table, but everyone was in agreement about the importance of transit to our region. We all believe the region deserves and needs a transit system that is safe, dependable, accessible, and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have comments for me? Well, I'm sure on behalf of all of our board members, we appreciate your time, the effort, the group's effort that has been put into this. And I know it's a daunting task to take on. There's so much to it, as we've seen from Neil's presentation. So just appreciate all of the time and your comments. Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
With, I mean, this is pretty extensive, so again, I certainly will support the huge thanks in the budget committee and the budget task force and all the work that goes into this, and trying to wrap your minds around all of these moving parts and pieces that make up TriMet from a financial perspective. Is there any recommendation going forward as far as is there anything to learn from this budget task force process that could be that the board could take away for next year?
Good question.
That's a good question. I'm a little
I didn't want to stump you.
Yeah.
I was just looking for the. I mean, this is excellent for our process as we look at this year's budget. But as I think about process, I think about next year. And is there anything that we can improve in that we can be thinking about now in regards to just the budget task force process? And you don't have to give an answer now, but if you could think about that, it'd be excellent to get your feedback in that regard. I know just kind of anecdotally, I've talked to a few folks that just in passing, they were on they were on the committee, and they didn't really say anything that needed improvement or anything, but they just mentioned that, yeah, I was on the budget committee, and you've got a lot of stuff that you have to take care of and look at.
Well, we particularly appreciated what we were talking about earlier, was the pay what you owe and fix what you have approach. That, with all the uncertainties that are happening right now with TriMet and the funding and the contract and so on, that is so important to just, get to a stable base. And so before we add service, which is desperately needed in a lot of areas, we all agree with that. It's really important to just get some of these fundamental things fixed. The labor issues, the contract negotiations, the service fixes, the new buses. That's what I think all of us thought in the past year.
I've got one other quick question, maybe harder than the first question, so I'm a little nervous to ask it, but ultimately, as we go through this, you've had the opportunity to come in and take a look at this, and with a great group of individuals that all have day jobs. And as we struggle to, the rest of the board members have talked about it, the public outreach, as we take this information and begin to roll this out to the public, is there anything that you took away from this experience this time that would help us, communicate this in a way that folks can understand? This is a lot of complicated and complex information that we then have to roll out to the constituents at a level of perceived transparency that that they can, transparency, or what's the saying? A person's not perspective is their reality, but a person's perception is their reality. And with that comes, transparency really isn't transparent if you don't understand it. And so, is there any feedback you can give in regards to how do we make this information a little more understandable?
Yeah, that's
it's a harder
question.
I know it is. And so this is something that we need answers for right now. But something that you can, that if you have any contact with any of the task force members, if you could ask them, is there anything that you remember that you can relay to us that would be extremely helpful, along with the incredible work you've already done?
Yeah, communication was a big topic. We probably talked about it at every meeting. It's not just the communication to the public, it's communication to the employees. And I'm not sure we can talk about it again as to how you can do that, but the more you talk, the more they'll understand. We talked about it yesterday, maybe more signs, social media. There's probably a lot of different ways to communicate. TriMet needs to get out front and start explaining what the issues are. It's causing, no service or whatever.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, again, I did have the honor of serving on the task force again this year as I did last year. And Luann did a great job on facilitating our meetings and leading us through this. In terms of your question about the process, I think one of the advantages in terms of process that I saw with this group, having been on it for the second year, is continuity. The membership is fairly consistent from last year to this year, and given the complexity, given the level of detail and the work, it takes time to get into this information and to understand it and be able to assimilate all of that. And so I think having continuity, a core continuity from year to year, I think is important and I think is very helpful. That being said, you always do get turnover in any group. And the people that came in this year, that were new to the process this year, I thought they did an excellent job in terms of catch-up and being able to contribute. The other thing that I really appreciate about this task force is if you look at the membership, and for members of the audience, this report is available online, I'm pretty sure. But I think if you look at the background, where the various people come from, it's a really fairly representative group of the region. And, all different interests, backgrounds, experiences are included there. And I think that's important. Not only business interests, but people that work with low-income communities, communities of color, business owners, economists, and I think the kind of exchange that occurs between members of the group is diversity that I think adds to the fun. So I think in terms of process, that's
It's an excellent point.
to bring to the table. So, I found it a very positive, personally a very positive experience both years that I did.
So we can count on you for another couple of years. Just to keep
Keep that continuity going.
Yeah, I want the continuity.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, how are we doing? Dan?
We're doing good.
We're doing pretty well.
Seeing you early.
Yeah.
Is that you?
All right, working on it.
Well, good morning, everyone. It was 4 months ago to the day, the last time that I was here for a briefing to give an update on the Portland-Milwaukee project, so it's timely that we do so again. Also want to try to answer a couple of the areas of inquiry that you all have had as we brought some of the recent issues before the board on the contracting basis. So got a little bit more information for you, not only on the items that are coming up this month, but also where we stand on contingencies and so forth. So with that, let me figure out how this works. There we go. Okay, I want to start with just an update of the chart we looked at last time, having to do with our funding and where our resources are. This really hasn't changed in the last 4 months. On the local side, if you go around clockwise, the left-hand chart in red is the money that we have available to us. So as you can see, this pie is almost completed. This section in here is our finance cost, and that's simply something that's accrued as we go. So there's a small amount of remaining local funds to be obtained. The biggest single piece of that is TriMet's second portion of our capital contribution. There's also City of Milwaukee money and some in-kind contributions, both from City of Portland in the form of some additional land, and from Clackamas County, some of the things that are party to the suit that Neil mentioned earlier that we need to continue to finish that. So very, very good situation on the local funding. On the federal funding, as you can see, the pie is just starting to be filled up clockwise, red funds in hand. That's our first appropriation from the last fiscal year, the first $85 million. We are expecting another appropriation for this year. We're scheduled to get $100 million, but we don't exactly know what we're going to get as the FTA works through the impacts of sequestration. There's a lot of different theories about what it could be, and those theories generally range in, I would say, 80 million to 100 million category. So overall sequestration is about a 5% cut. Obviously that would give us 95 million, but may not be applied evenly. So we just don't really know. But we have no reason to think that it won't be at least 80, and we have no reason to think that they won't continue to provide annual appropriations as they have with all previous FFGAs. In addition, however, we have sold bonds. Dave Auxier sold interim financing bonds, as we've talked about a couple of times, to provide us with the working capital that we need to continue the construction cash flow unimpeded. So we have $347 million available to us through those FFGA backed bonds. So we're in fine shape on looking at the project overall, we're about 39% complete in terms of the scheduled time elapsed. 37% of the costs have been incurred, and we're about 37% complete physically. So again, we're still in good alignment there, just approaching 40% overall. If we look at the costs we've incurred so far, we've crossed the $500 million point, $549.4 million in expenditures so far. This is going to be a big year for us in construction. The pie up there shows the various categories. So far, the biggest single group of expenditures has been on right-of-way, and as you've been tracking that through various inputs and condemnations, we're almost complete with the right-of-way program insofar as the cost is concerned. So construction is the next biggest expenditure, and we're going to see that grow rather dramatically over the next 2 seasons, because that's when the bulk of the construction cost is incurred. I've got some photographs here. We won't take the time to look at a lot of detail, but we did have an aerial flyover of the project back in January. It happened to be a nice sunny day too. So I want to show you a few of those slides. They're also in your packet. Before I do that, I want to point out that we've given you an update of our what we call our project dashboard. It's on your table. It's basically just some of the high-level facts. Many of these things I'll be going through in the remainder of the presentation, but just wanted to alert you to that. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or in the future if you may have a time to look at that. I'd also like to just mention our safety statistics. We're doing very well on safety. Both our recordable incident rate and our lost time incident rate are well below the Oregon heavy construction averages. So we had a few incidents early on that brought us some concern. We pulled our contractors together and really reinforced the message, and the results have been very positive. So that part of it's looking very good. Go ahead and look at some of the construction photos. This is a picture looking east from up around the PSU area, looking down Lincoln Street. You can see here the trackway open and under construction, and the streets along either side already completed in January. The west contract's going very well. We'll be turning over the first section to the systems contractor in October. A little hard to see here, but this is a picture looking from the new OHSU building in South Waterfront back up toward downtown. And so you can see coming out of Lincoln Street, this is the new bridge, what we call the harbor structure. It comes down and threads through the I-5 highway section and gets ready to turn to go to the river. Now, since this photograph is taken, most of this deck, this is steel beams here. This green stuff is reinforcing steel that's been placed on the deck. This is all poured out now, and the section shown in steel has the reinforcing and is ready to be poured exactly pretty soon. So that structure is coming along very, very well. This next photograph is looking the other way from pretty much the same place. The line will cross here, go along the new building, the OUS building, and across the new bridge and over onto the east side. So this is an area we've had a surcharge of material to force settlement in that area. It's working very well. The settlement has been exactly as the geotech's planned. It's a very, very good thing. So we'll begin now constructing the trackway and the station in that area this summer.
And so you remove that surcharge?
Yes.
With the respect. So will that be at the same grade as the adjoining properties?
No, it's still raised. This whole area is being raised. The front door of the building and our station platform are in the 14 to 16 foot level above the surrounding territory. And that had to do with basically capping some of the unsuitable materials that are in that area. And that's the same reason we used the surcharge then, to make sure that everything was settled and stopped. The next slide is a photograph of the bridge. It's really amazing how much this has changed since this shot was taken in January. So over here on the east side, this tower is now up quite a bit higher. That tower will be topped out in April. Over here, there's formwork that was used to pour this first section of decking. That is mostly all removed now and is being erected on this side to prepare for that same first segment of deck. It's called the pier table. So that'll be poured later this summer. And on this side now, we are starting the installation of the formwork at either end to allow us to start building that bridge outward from the pier. And so that's happening right now. Some of that formwork is already in place. So very good progress on the bridge. As we move down along the east side, this is a picture looking north along 17th Avenue. This is TriMet's Center Street facility and our bus yard and bus maintenance facility. A little hard to see here. What's happened here is we've cleared all the right-of-way. It kind of widens the street onto the east side at the north end and then onto the west side as we come down through here. So again, if you look at your handout, you can see it a little better, but that's basically all of that area has now been cleared and open and ready for construction. We've been doing a lot of utility work down there, and we'll start the excavation in the spring and track work this fall. We're underway completely the rest of the way. This is a section at Southeast Tacoma where the station will be in this area. We go from this side, cut through this right of way, and then come down here and up and over the main line railroad. This next section is some additional, very much like along Center Street area on 17th. We have cleared the right-of-way on the side that we're building on and are now in the process of relocating utilities and beginning the construction of the retaining walls that allows us to build. So construction from one end of the project to the other right now. A couple quick highlights on our economic benefits. Our DBE program is going very well. We've crossed the $100 million mark in awards to DBE contractors. We have 106 firms involved, doing 296 total contracts. We're doing very well in that regard, both on the professional services side and also on the construction side. The numbers are quite good, and this is by far the biggest DBE program we've ever had. Looking at our workforce numbers, 1,800 on-site construction jobs, 933 professional and technical jobs so far. And that'll still continue to grow as we add more contracts and more subcontractors doing various parts of the work. Now, if we look at our diversity, you see people of color are running at 24%, women in the workforce at 8.5%, and 15% on apprentice hours. Again, all very good numbers. So we're really pleased with that program overall. The next thing I want to do is update you on our contingency utilization. Again, we've looked at this slide before several times. This takes our total contingency pool as it started with our FFGA and has it assigned into various categories, each shown here with a vertical bar. So we had an amount for right-of-way, another amount for final design changes, for going to bid and market, risk that we put inside the contracts, construction change orders, claims, and finally an owner's reserve amount. So those were our categories. As you would expect to see, the earlier ones get drawn down first. The red shows what has been consumed in that particular category. So as you can see, all the right-of-way has been consumed, and the final design scope changes have been mostly consumed. There's a little bit left, and we'll probably leave it there because we're not completely under contract in all of our work. Same with bid market. We needed some of that to get to contract awards, but there's still a nice amount left to cover the remaining contracts. Now this time we've introduced this green color, and that's basically represents change order or risk money that has been allocated to the contracts. So as we come to you with a contract amount, it may contain some risk money inside the contract, something that we have either as a provisional sum or a risk we're passing to the contractor. And you also authorize change order lines. So what we wanted to do is show you how much of those amounts have been assigned out to the contracts. And basically, we've assigned out exactly as we have planned as we've gone. So we have very little left to put under contract. We have the remainder of the Center Street work being done by Harvey. We have the Park Avenue parking lot garage. And so we have a little bit of risk money and construction change order allowance left for them. The rest has been assigned, but it hasn't been spent yet. The red shows how much of it has actually been drawn down in the form of risks encountered or change orders. So now I don't want to leave you with the impression though that it won't be used. We fully expect all of that will be used, and we size those change order allowances based on our past experience and our expectations of what we normally would encounter in a project of that type. So what we'll see now as we go forward in future updates is we'll get to see how that's being used and how that sort of trends against where we are in the work. The early work usually requires the most of it because there are more unknowns in the underground part of it than there are in the above ground. So finally, we have a category for claims. We have not had any claims filed yet, so that's still all available. And then finally, this is the owner's reserve. And so we have drawn on some of the owner's reserve. This is basically where we would collect both wins and losses. So we've had some things that came in well under our expectations, and we've had other things that came in over. So what we're seeing here, what's been drawn down here mostly is related to right-of-way relocation. I think we've said in all of our briefings that has been far more complex and far more expensive than we anticipated. And so we used up all that we had for right-of-way, and now we're starting to hit the owner's reserve. And I think that's about it. Now the right-of-way program is approaching the end of its work, and so I think that part will slow down. We also are anticipating some costs, although they haven't actually been incurred yet. We've recognized them in our budget for some additional startup expenses, some work we have to do on the previous rail car fleet to make it compatible with the new rail car fleet. Technology changes each time, but the cars have to be interchangeable, so it always amounts to some additional work on the older cars. The one win we did get is the interim financing bonds came in at a lower interest rate than we had planned on, so we get that savings, so that accrues back to owner's reserve. So overall, I would say we're in a very good position. If you look at what our planned expenditures were over time, we're actually not even quite down to what we expected from the most conservative case, the best case. And we are far from the amount drawn down where FTA begins to take concern. So overall, we're doing very, very well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you can go first.
Well, I'm a little confused on the green.
Okay.
You introduce a new color, it throws me, but so the green, to draw that down, or is that coming from owner's reserve?
No, it came from that category. So for example, on the construction change orders, we had contingency planned for each of our contracts. And as you've awarded contracts, you assign change order contingency. And so that turns that amount to green. And the reason we want to show it in a separate color is because it's essentially been assigned. It's not spent yet, but we also don't want to give the impression that it's available for other uses. So we have taken, for example, on our bridge contract, we set up a change order allowance with that. And we want that to be considered spent or needed or consumed. Even though it hasn't been yet, we don't want people to think that there's all this money available for something else, a new piece of scope that somebody might aspire to. We want to hold it in reserve as if it's spent, but we're making the distinction here because it hasn't actually been needed yet. And maybe we won't need it all, and that would be the best possible outcome, and then it would get returned
So,
to
if we
blue.
needed it, are we using the red then?
Yeah, once it's needed, then it becomes in the red
Okay, so that's
category.
just what remains if we need it.
No,
Right,
the
that's.
blue is what's left. So
Okay.
it starts as
I
blue,
was
it's
confused.
available.
Okay,
It goes to green once we've assigned it.
all
It
right.
goes to red once we spend it.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay, that's my first question. Go ahead.
So, I think you've answered this question a little bit. I just want to clarify to make sure I understand it correctly. So for the right-of-way, we've spent 39 million
Mhm.
of the contingency, roughly. And that 39 million was that was the contingency amount that we had allocated for the right-of-way in the beginning.
That's correct.
And so once the allocation, see, because as you look at this, you could be, I mean, where do we start with the right-of-way? Because that's missing now, because we can't really see where we started.
Well, we started with the total amount.
Correct.
And it started as blue and it all went to red until it was all gone.
Exactly. But as I look at this one, all I see is red. So I think, well, do we just do 39 million in right-of-way contingency, or did we allocate 25 million and we spent 39 million? So when you said it, when you referenced the owner's reserve, because you said, well, we're using some of the owner's reserve for the right-of-way.
That's correct.
So that kind of let me know that ultimately we budgeted originally 39 million in contingency for right-of-way. We spent all that 39 million. Now part of the owner's reserve is the right-of-way contingency.
That's correct.
That's sitting
right.
over here.
Exactly. Right.
So I picked that up, but just in reference for folks who are looking at this, I mean, so ultimately we budgeted 39, we've used 39, now we're using part of the owner reserve as the right-of-way. The other thing that kind of throws me is just having the red on top rather than on the bottom. Because then you see, I mean, having the red on the top, you're thinking, so how much did we really spend in that contingency? And you're trying to figure that out. So if there's a way that we can have the red at the bottom, and then, you know, so as I'm looking at final design, I'm assuming that we've spent 7 million, maybe 8 million.
Yes, that's right.
And that's a little easier because it's so close, but when you get over here to owner's reserve, it's maybe 10 million? I mean, I can't tell. So if it started at the bottom, that would be better.
We'd be happy to do it the other way. I would just say for us, the way we tend to think of it is we're drawing it down.
Uh-huh.
We're drawing it down until it's gone. So that's the reason
Yeah.
we put it at the top. And
We could call it drawing it up. Never heard that phrase, but.
Filling it up and
Yeah. So, you know, so this is, I really like this. Actually, the green is helpful because ultimately it's allocated but not yet used, which is, because we've approved some things recently and that was our question. And so we haven't used it yet, but it is allocated based on the board approvals that we did go through just recently. And so the total contingency that we have across the whole project would be essentially the total of all these.
That's right.
And then the total contingency used at this point would be all of the reds combined, and then allocated but not used are all the greens.
Right.
And so that we could do that kind of addition and come up with what, you know, our total contingency usage is. As a percentage, would you happen to know that offhand at all?
What our contingency use is?
Yeah, as a percentage.
I think that'd be very helpful.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but what I can say is there's about $68 million left in blue.
$68 million.
That's basically what we have still remaining to work with. Now some more will be assigned in change order allowance. And the 68 assumes all of the green is consumed, which I think is the fair assumption. Until the project gets near, in a given contract, it's near completed, we should assume we're going to need it all. That's what our experience tells us. If we don't, great, that's the place we want to be. But what we don't want to do is start oversubscribing and thinking it's not going to be needed.
And our comfort level here at this point, and it's a very similar question I asked at the last board meeting, is that we feel like the 68 million is sufficient to complete the job and move forward, and we don't see any cost overruns outside of that. Excellent.
So, you did a
I'm
great
done.
job,
I'm
thank
done.
you, that helped me. So are we, and Dr. Bethel, sorry, I'm going to come back. We're really looking at this point at the owner's reserve in terms of what ends up being left. So let's say the contingency for the job is, what, 5-6% of the entire job. We may be left with 1%. At some point, we want to see where we end up, and I know that's a ways away, but that might be helpful to have the percentages drawn down.
We start doing what we call a cost to complete report.
Okay.
It's a little early in the
Great.
project for that to be too meaningful, but we're going to do our first one at the end of the current fiscal year. So July 1st, we'll have our first formal cost to complete report. But as we move farther through the project, those become more and more reliable and become a better planning tool. And believe me, I am hoping that we have the conversation at the end. What are we going to do with the leftovers? Well, I really hope that's exactly the conversation we have.
Good. Dr. Bethel?
Yes, Dan, I just wanted to follow with the chart. Whether you reverse the red or leave it the way it is, if there is some numbers assigned to it, see, the numbers would make it much more clearer either way you do it. But say, for instance, in final design, the red equals X number of millions, and that tells us what's left in the blue. And that gives an easier way of reading this instead of trying to estimate and then trying to figure out that you hear it someplace else. Much as in this, as you did the numbers, you just what the total hours were to equal that percentage. If that was placed in this contingency status chart, it would be much easier to read and understand.
Be happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
With that, we can draw down all day long. I mean, that is excellent, Dr. Bello. If there was the number out to the side like that, then that solves the issue, and we could draw down.
Okay, you got it. Okay, I wanted to continue with just a little bit more information. We have a couple board items coming this month that I wanted to just highlight. We're going to be awarding the next phase of work on the Center Street remodel through the Hoffman contract. And we have 3 art contracts to award. So let's start just a little bit with the Center Street remodel. There's a nice rendering of where we're going with that building. For your recollection, we've done 2 mods so far. We did the original mod 1, which was the pre-construction and parking lots in June of last year. In January, we added the next phase, which was for the demolition inside on a couple of floors. And at that time, you asked for some further information about where we are overall in the budget, so I'm going to come to that in a minute. This month's activity is the single biggest mod. This is the renovation of floors 2 through 4. 4 including the new Operations Command Center, 3 and 2 being renovated office space. Then we have a couple future actions will come later this year. One to actually do the Operations Command Center itself on the 4th floor. And then a second one to do some renovations in the 1st floor bus report area. So this is the financial numbers. We did not originally have the pre-construction service, the parking lots, or the demolition separated out. It was all included in these first 4 numbers. So what we've done just for the budget purposes is we've made the first 3 equal to the actual amounts. So basically all this that's remaining is the budget we have for the action that you're going to be taking this month. So you can see again the mod 3 is the biggest single piece for the renovation work on 2 through 4, plus some additional parking lots and maintenance areas. And we're under budget on what will be coming before you. As we look forward to the next 2, we have our budget for it, and we have some early estimates. The design work's not completed, but those are looking good as well. So this overall contract to renovate the building should come in under budget. Again, it's a relief to be coming into mod 3, which is the biggest single piece, and having that. The art contracts, as you may recall, we have an overall art budget as part of the project, part of the grant expenditures. It's $3.2 million in total. That is subdivided into about 20 different contracts. Most of those are well below board threshold, but there are 8 that require board approval. You did 5 of them back in last July. There were 3 remainders that we hadn't advanced well enough to have the final pricing. We now have that, and they'll be coming to you later this month. So I just got one slide for each one of what that art project is. If you recall, most of our art project is concentrated at the station areas. So we have 3 that are all related to stations. This first one is at the Clinton Station. This is a standalone art piece that is made from reclaimed heavy freight rail that was in this area. And it's being bent into a form that's supposed to be representative of a transit map. We've all seen transit maps from a lot of transit cities. That's what they're trying to do. Very technically challenging piece. Bending the rail that tight is really requiring a lot of complex engineering. So this piece is known as intersections. The second contract is for the artwork that will be placed at the Southeast Park Avenue station area. This piece doesn't have a name yet, but as you can see, it's kind of a leafy lattice that's evocative of the Oak Grove neighborhood and their aspirations for the greening of that whole area. And the nice thing about this, the design allows for events to be staged underneath that lattice work, which is something that the community really wants. Finally, the third contract is for mosaic tiles on the shelters and columns of the shelters all throughout the system. Each one's a little different based on the way it communicates to the history and the values of each individual station area. We might have a sample in here. Oh, here it is. This is Michelle Traver, our art manager, and she's got this sample of what one of these column tile wrappings would look like. And another interesting story in this is there is a local art manufacturer called Bullseye Glass, and they're actually in the Brooklyn neighborhood, and they were more known for fused glass. We had difficulty locating a glass supplier to make the mosaic tiles that was an American-made company, an American company. The artist has used companies in other countries, Canada and Europe. So the artists worked with this manufacturer to expand their capabilities from fused glass into making these mosaic tiles. So not only is it a really nice art piece, but it's a good Buy America story. It's a good local job story. So those are the three contracts that will be coming from the art.
Then a question on the art book. I'm probably like most average citizens, have a hard time understanding what the artist is trying to do, what they do. And then when I see the price tag, it makes me wonder a whole lot more. Is it possible that even when you're doing this and making presentations, you could get from the artist, what is their concept? What are they trying to envision and say? So as we're asked, I mean, what does that mean? Why? And we would have something to say. And also it would help the general public to know what that means. So then the second piece would be, is there something in terms of some type of signage at the stations where this is happening to tell what it is, so that people don't wonder? I mean, I drive across the bridge and I see this big monstrosity of stuff down here on MLK now, and somebody tells me that's supposed to be art, and to me it's just really rusted iron. And so there is some concept to that, but as an average citizen, it just does not click. And so I need some help as we're doing all of this to approve any more of these artist contracts. I at least want to know, have some idea of what I'm talking about.
Well, we certainly know that there's always plenty of discussion and controversy in public art, and I'm sure we'll be no exception to that. I don't know specifically about whether there will be any labeling at the piece itself, but we have typically on all of our projects, light rail extensions that had major art components, have done a standalone written piece for people to be able to understand the thinking and the intent of the artist's pieces, and I'm sure we'll be doing that here as well. And insofar as these items coming to the board, we'd be happy to include some dialogue of what the artist's intent is.
Thank you.
I think I've just got one more slide. Just some looking ahead, some further board actions that will be coming later this year. Park Avenue Park and Ride station, as I mentioned. Central Maintenance Away facility that's related to replacing the maintenance away facility that was in the new light rail right-of-way down at the Center Street facility. So we're going to locate them to a place elsewhere along the line. We may have some additional condemnation. I'm hoping not. Most of the remaining properties we have to take are under the blanket authority that we previously gave us, but there's always a chance we'll have something that either has a residential relocation or tips the threshold. And then there's a couple additional things for some renewal work on the Banfield line. This is not in LR, but it's in the capital projects area that will be coming later this year as well. With that, I'll conclude. I'm going over time. I apologize for that. Happy to answer any remaining questions.
All right. It's nice to get updated. Any questions, comments?
I would just make a comment. I think the staff is doing an incredible job on this project, and I'm really grateful for Dan's leadership and the work that's been going on. The project's in a very comfortable spot given all of the challenges.
It's an absolutely fabulous team.